Hey, this is Arthur Zakowitz from Street Talk. We have a great guest coming up on our next podcast. It's Jessica Murphy, who's the co-founder and CEO of TrueFit, which is one of the early kind of fit technology platforms out there. And she's been a trailblazer. She's going to talk about some new technology that they're looking at, agentic commerce, and some other things that are making a fit more pleasing for shoppers. And we'll see you then. Thanks. Welcome to Corner of Fit's Street Talk. This is where we gather insights from industry experts and executive leaders in fashion apparel, retail technology, beauty, and more. Thanks for joining us. Before we start, I just want to thank our underwriter, Corner of Fifth, a full-service content creation, marketing, and design studio that believes in the power of storytelling. Learn more at corneroffifth.studio. Today, we welcome Jessica Murphy, co-founder and CEO of TrueFit. Before we were recording, we were like trying to figure out when was the last time we saw one another. That was it 10 years ago?
I think it might have been. Time flies, I guess, when you're having fun, but it's unfortunate with COVID in there. I think it was 10 years ago.
But that was a dark moment.
Ugh.
Transformed everything. But, I think maybe it even helped your business. Probably, right? I mean,
I'd say we were, we spent many, many years convincing the world that this was a thing and that they needed to have fit technology and that this is a place they needed to invest. And COVID came and, as tough as COVID was, obviously for all of us, for our business, it was probably the best thing that could have ever happened because everybody was forced overnight to close stores, to still sell goods that they had a lot of inventory of. And the shopper didn't have the ability to try things on. They didn't have the ability to get the confidence that they typically get when they walk into a store. So it was as hard of a moment as it was a real breakthrough moment for the company as well.
But so let's start there. What is TrueFit? What was the impetus behind launching it? When did you launch it? It's been quite a while. You're considered a trailblazer in the industry for like doing the fit technology thing. So,
well, I think when you're first to something, unfortunately, it takes, in my case, sometimes a couple decades to finally make it on the map, right? But we saw really early on, so we started the company 20 years ago. And really, it was just to solve this problem of like, there's got to be a better way to connect people to products and to help people know what's going to work for them uniquely, because we all have different preferences. Fit is so subjective. And so that was kind of the impetus behind, there's got to be something. And at the time, there really wasn't anything. Levi's had been dabbling in Levi's personal pair, which was custom manufacturing. You had companies called Intelligent that were doing the 3D body scanners in malls, but there was no kind of digital and online software for e-commerce that existed. And so we were the crazy people to decide, okay, let's go solve this thing and let's figure out how to do it and build the technology. And, the thesis behind why we exist has never changed, throughout those 20 years. I think the delivery mechanism, how we do what we do, that's all, that's fundamentally shifted many times throughout the course of 2 decades. But the reason why we're here, why we exist is still the same. We solve for those indecision moments of, that ultimately every fashion purchase collapses into, which is, will it fit? And bigger picture, we consider ourselves a fit intelligence layer that shoppers can use to confidently make decisions about what to buy. We typically live on the product detail page, but now in an agentic world, we're increasingly now even plugging into other agents to offer that fit intelligence directly inside of other agents as well.
So when in the fashion apparel shopping experience, what has changed and what has stayed the same since you founded the company?
I love this question. Honestly, everything has changed. I mean, I can't think of one thing that has not changed since founding the company, but I think that's honestly the reason why I get up every day is because if it hadn't changed, I don't think I'd still be here. I don't think I'd still be solving this problem. But the fact that we can solve it in different ways, learn every day, just some examples of what's changed. I mean, one of the ones that we talk about all the time these days is, the compression of the customer journey and how the product detail page is now the front door and the decision surface that people are arriving into. That's totally different than a couple of years ago where the homepage was where all the investment went. That's where you told your brand story. That's one example. Another is the shift in expectations. There is no absence of information out there. right? And, and I think more than ever, people need decision grade guidance. They need to, remove that cognitive overload and still be inspired, but also to give me trust in now less than 10 seconds. Because in this world of YouTube shorts that we live in, and, and of course, the first thing I say is YouTube Shorts because I have 3 kids, so that's where my mind goes. Is they're going like this, and it's not TikTok; it's YouTube Shorts for them. But we have just such short attention spans now. So you're navigating that environment, and then like just the volatility of the market. We talked about COVID, but I think beyond that, look at the volatility we're seeing even with bodies changing at a rapid pace with GLP-1s. I mean, what we're seeing with our plus size retailers is extraordinary, and they're scrambling to figure out how do you serve the existing customers, but in a very different way. And so that wreaks havoc on things like size grades and sizing curves. So truly everything's changed. The tech stacks have changed. The UX has changed. But I think therein lies the opportunity.
So you mentioned the product display page, right? So
Yeah,
how do you get there? I know you guys just launched a shopping agent,
we
right?
did.
So does agentic commerce, is that how you get to that page? Like how does it work? What's under the hood there?
Yeah. So you get to it today pretty, the same way that you did always. You go to a retailer site and you can experience an agentic flow through there. Now, though, we're doing some current integrations with third parties where you're going to start seeing TrueFit show up really deep within an agentic experience, a third-party agent. And that we're connecting into through something called an MCP, a model context protocol. And think about that like a USB port into our intelligence, what we know about products, how they're fitting, who's buying them, and then ultimately how to personalize that for an individual. So I think it's a really exciting time for us because we've always just been, direct to other businesses. So B2B to C, because ultimately shoppers are our end users. But now to have the flexibility and to really be the fit intelligence inside of other agents is super exciting for the business.
I just want to go back just to what you were saying before about how, people are changing and the plus size market are you guys, from your perspective or opinion,
Yeah.
those customers are so loyal to those plus size retailers, even though they're kind of different sizing, right? It's that they're still connected to them, right? So that to me is interesting. I haven't really thought about that before, but they probably like the shopping experience and the fit. Like what is a plus? I guess that's my question. What is a plus size retailer today?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, not everybody, the whole world isn't on GLP-1s, but enough of them are, right? So I think it's, and I think this is true for every business right now. If you are living in the status quo, you're a brand that's going to be left behind. And I think we can't operate, I was talking to Cass before, before we started. And, ultimately I left my buying position at a massive merchant really because it was all based on, well, what did we do in the past? I called it last yearitis. Like, what did we do in the past that worked? And there was no ability to be creative and say, well, why don't we add this new vendor because this is really hot? But no, you had to, adhere to a very strict vendor matrix. And I use that example from over 20 years ago because I think the same is true today. If you're a brand that is not cognizant of the amount of change that's around you, and if you're not structured in a way, and that goes from talent to systems, that is able to react flexibly to where your customer is right now, I think those are the brands that are really going to suffer.
But by the way, Cass is our producer, Cass Spencer, just in case you don't know.
Hi, Cass.
So that's interesting. The idea of working with third party, you mentioned before, is that
Yeah.
what it takes sort of, okay, we're going to have to collaborate, we have to team up, we have to think in a more of a systems way. Is that how we succeed?
Totally. Yeah. And actually, it's a trend that I'm really seeing across the industry right now. I think there's, the onus is on us as service providers and technology companies to really figure out how to play in the sandbox together. It's not necessarily for the retailers and the brands can be the facilitators of some of that connection, but it really is on us to figure out how to integrate in because customers and shoppers don't want to use 5 different agents in an experience. They don't want to start at ChatGPT or in Gemini and then, get to another third-party agent, and then, we can't have these disconnected experiences. So we're really putting it on ourselves and that's why we were an early adopter of MCP, to really figure out, well, how do we do this, and how do we make it just easier for other technology companies to plug into our intelligence?
I think, returns, it's a $850 billion headache for retailers. And I think this is actually one of the first things we talked about when we were discussing
I think it was.
on the value propositions. What role do you guys play in addressing returns?
Yeah, so returns are really the effect of uncertainty and the downstream cost of that uncertainty. And in fashion, fit uncertainty is the primary driver of things like bracketing, which is those just in case buys where people are buying multiple sizes just in case one doesn't work. And those are, like, when you think about behavior like that, that's guaranteed a 50% return rate right there. You have margin erosion because return logistic costs are really high. It's very expensive to handle those goods, figure out what to do with them, mark them down, if you have a long return window. And so TrueFit's role is really to, number one, give confidence up front to avoid some of those returns. And then number two, if there's going to be a return, learn from that return and adjust over time. So adjust the recommendations, adjust the predictions, and help shoppers confidently buy the right things the first time so we can help decrease those insurance buys.
So you built a network, I guess, a massive across 91,000 brands, maybe more, hundreds of
Yeah.
millions of shopper profiles. How do you aggregate that intelligence without exposing the proprietary retail data? And why does
Yeah.
this matter for retailers who participate and work with you?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I appreciate that. I think it's, from the very beginning, we felt really strongly that we were building a solution for the industry and that everybody was going to benefit from kind of this collective of information, because it allows us to work on their behalf to see beyond their four virtual walls. One of the biggest issues that retailers have is that they only see the information that they know about, their own sales, their own returns. And we take a lot of care not to expose any retailer specific information. Like, we're never going to share, retailer A's return rate or anything about their purchase behaviors. But in aggregate, when you combine all that information and you can see the patterns across multiple retailers, that turns into very, very useful and intelligent personal recommendations. So as an example, Nike is one of the most purchased brands in the world. And we can see people buying Nike, across different retailers. And that really helps improve our view of how does that product, that style run. And then we're using that intelligence to benefit the customers that we serve. So it's really a give-get, and ultimately, like most data collectives, if they're only, you have to have trust, you have to have governance that drives participation, and then ultimately that participation drives greater forms of accuracy.
Let's pretend I'm a CMO of a kind of $2 billion, maybe looking to grow apparel retailer,
Yeah.
and I'm talking with you. What is the actual evaluation question should I be asking you about AI agents? And not from the marketing perspective, but like, what should I be asking? What are the questions I need to be asking you?
I think the central question is, what's the ground truth source? So when you look at any LLM out there right now, and most agents, they are trained on generic, publicly available information. Much of that data is cached. So on the surface, you can ask size and fit related questions, and they'll spit back what seems like a really intelligent answer. When you start to poke in, well, how do you know about that? How do you know that that's true? All of a sudden it starts to unravel. Oh, I don't have access to returns data, but it will tell you, I looked at returns and I looked at reviews but it actually doesn't. And so I think that's the first question that I would ask is, well, what's the agent? What's the ground truth source of the agent? And can it, infuse different, more intelligent sources of information that I have or that I might offer up? And then secondly, what outcomes is it driving? I see a lot of focus right now, particularly in agentic, on engagement. And while, of course, you need engagement to drive outcomes, but engagement for engagement's sake doesn't drive business outcomes. So I'd really want to know, what business outcome is it driving? Is it helping to reduce indecision? Is it lifting conversion? Is it reducing returns? And that is how we're really testing our success in agentic, not in, I mean, of course, the first signal is, are people using it? Because you do have to have people use it. But more importantly is the business metrics.
So, you go into a typical corporate headquarters for a retailer, the boardroom, they're they want investments. They said, well, let's jump on agentic. How come we're not doing that? How come we're not deploying that? There's a lot of
Yeah.
pressure on the C-suite. You show up like to NRF and there's all these wonderful vendors and technologies. And if I'm the chief, technology officer, I had to go back and have to make a convincing case, right? Because, there's a lot of pressure to save, not spend money really, right? And how do I convince my CFO, look, we got to invest in this. We got to rethink our tech stack. And this is a priority.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it is you can't, like, going back to that status quo component. So there's the measurement piece, which I think goes back to, like, ultimately they have to run a P&L, right? So you're thinking, you have to orient it around what are the things and the investments that are really going to drive margin, that's going to protect my margin. But then beyond that, it's the thing that I mentioned around the status quo. Like, you don't want to be the one left behind right now. It doesn't mean that you have to rush to, like, launch an agent yourself, but you have to understand, like, what your architecture looks like. How's your data organized? There are some fundamental decisions that every retail board needs to be thinking about right now. And it's not necessarily just a rush to agentic, but it is preparing for the inevitable moment. It's the biggest technological shift we have ever witnessed. It's not coming, it's here. And so I think those foundational pieces, which really have always been the plague of retail. It's some of the messiest data that exists in the world. And so how you structure that for visibility in AI systems is critical. And so that's the first investment that I would recommend making is really in the organization of that data.
So just a few more questions. How would you describe the overall value proposition of TrueFit for shoppers, consumers, as well as for retailers?
Yeah, for shoppers, it's really confidence at the moment of their decisions. And fit for us has always been more than just what size should I buy, or is this running true to size? And that's the beauty of kind of this agentic moment, is that we can go from static recommendations really to conversations about what's going to work for you. So everything from, like, am I going to be able to sit in this dress, or I'm running around chasing my kids? Is this going to work for me? How much stretch does it have? So really it's around less regret and fewer, avoidable returns. And on the retailer side, it's about conversion lift, margin protection, reducing those avoidable returns as well. We don't want to curb discovery. I think discovery is critical in fashion in particular, but what we really try hard to offer is a solution that allows people to buy things that are going to work for them. The discovery piece is, do I like the color? Do I like this silhouette? But we don't want people buying things that we absolutely know are going to be a return item.
Last question. We ask this of everybody. What does fashion, apparel, retail technology mean to you, both maybe on a professional level and on a personal level?
That's a good question. For me, they've been so inextricably connected for so long because we have served fashion retailers with technology. I can't think about those things separately just by the nature of what I do. So, but I think for me, it really has always been about creating seamless buying experiences, and fashion and fit in particular is such an emotional buy, such a high stakes buy. So for me, it's to use technology to really bring joy to shopping and to remove friction that doesn't need to be there.
Excellent. Jessica, great seeing you again.
Oh my goodness, it's such a pleasure.
Well,
And I've so appreciated the coverage through the years. You have been, one of the ones that have had kind of a front row seat to the development of this over the last 2 decades, and just can't thank you enough for being along for the ride.
My pleasure. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again.
Take care, Arthur.
Well, that's a wrap on this episode of Street Talk. If today's conversation was useful, the best thing you could do is share it with a colleague. It generally helps us grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a review. It takes 30 seconds and makes a real difference. For the full episode write-up, show notes, and our weekly newsletter, visit streettalk.studio. We're also on LinkedIn and Instagram at Street Talk Studio. We'll be back next week, and thanks for listening.